Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Joy of SharePoint. We are going to get started here in just a minute. It looks like it is 12 noon Eastern on the dot, but we'll give folks a few minutes to join the fun. And if you hear odd noises, this is coming to you live from the airport in Orlando. So, guess what? It's Ignite Week. I have Ashley Rogers with me. Ashley, how is your day going?
Fantastic. I'm happy it's Friday. We had some crazy weather here last night, but sunshine today.
Yay. All right, now you're up north. Have you had snow yet?
Oh, no, not yet. Thank goodness. I am not looking forward to that, but I'll take the sunshine today.
Absolutely. I'll take sunshine any day. It's actually a little cloudy in Orlando, but that's okay. That's okay. It's Florida. You know it's going to rain for at least an hour every day.
Isn't that the truth?
It's just the rule. All right, let's see, 12:01. We'll give it a second while we're waiting for people to filter in. So you guys may have noticed that today's webinar is going to be all about hub sites. And, we hear it over and over. Ashley, I know you hear it too. We need global navigation. How can we have global navigation if everything's its own separate site? Do you hear that a lot as you're out and about and talking with people?
All the time, people are very concerned about where that global navigation went. How will the users find anything if that global
Mhm.
nav isn't there right at the top?
Absolutely. So I'm going to launch a poll while we're waiting for folks to come in. We'll leave it open for just a minute. But I'm curious. I would like to know who of you all out there are using or are adopting the flat architecture. And I've been super impressed. I had a client we've been working with recently. They're migrating from 2010 to 2016, right? So they're not ready for the cloud yet. But as they're making this move to get into a version of SharePoint that, is not reached end of life, they're going ahead and architecting with that modern framework in mind, so they're ready for the cloud.
That's
How awesome is
impressive.
that?
That's
I
really
know, right?
great. Very forward
I was
thinking.
like, exactly. I was like, you guys should be the poster child for on-prem because you're thinking about it and you're preparing because you know what's going to happen. And it's kind of it's quite the shift because you can't just lift it from one spot and dump it in another.
That's for sure, but take the time to do the hard work now, that'll set it up, a lot better later. Easier transition when you're making the move to the cloud.
Oh, absolutely. And Darlene just brought up a very interesting point. I should have had another option here because they've not implemented it yet, but you're preparing for it. And like Ashley just said, that's so important. You're preparing, you're thinking ahead, you're planning. I used to have an IT manager that would say, you know what? Let's just throw some stuff on the wall and see what sticks. And I was the only SharePoint person in that organization, and it was my job to clean up what didn't stick, what fell on the floor. So I always hated it when he said that. All right, so it looks like about 77% of folks have voted. Appreciate you guys chiming. Oh, we're up to 80. So it looks like 37% yes, 63% no, and then Darlene, some of you all are out there going, not yet, but we're getting ready to do it, which is fantastic. And we're glad you're here. I hope we give you some really good food for thought and some guidance as you're making this plan. As always, for those of you that have been on the webinars with me before, if you have questions, please ask the question, go to chat, whatever works for you. We're going to be paying attention to that, and we're going to try to answer all your questions. Actually, I have the questions undocked, and I'm keeping an eye on it as we go. Please don't be shy.
Yeah, and guys, I just want to make sure that to send it to both of us, let's have that drop down say organizers and panelists, just so that I can see it. I think there might be some questions coming through that only Joy can see right now. So
Ooh,
love to
good
get
call, good
involved
call.
and answer.
Yes, Ashley knows her stuff. Ashley, how long you been doing SharePointy stuff now?
Oh my gosh, it's close to 10 years.
Oh,
It's my
oh,
it's my longest relationship. I love SharePoint.
so you're almost as old as me then. I've been in it for just over 11. But for any of you that joined the Back with Power webinar that we did about back to school time, Ashley was here with us to show us some really cool things that you can do with Flow. In fact, I call her our Pate Group Flow Queen. So more to come from Ashley, I think, in future webinars with some awesome Flow magic, or voodoo as I call it. Voodoo. All right, one more poll as we're getting sorted, because, and Darlene, you may fall into this one better. Actually, no, if you're preparing, you won't. I'm sorry. I was thinking ahead. So for those of you that have implemented, are you using hub sites? Or are you thinking about it? Maybe you're still trying to get the feel. No, but we want to, thinking about it. Not sure we're doing it right. Okay. Okay. Yes, and with great success. Awesome. I love the polls. I love watching the numbers come in live. It's so exciting. We got about 62% of the votes in. Okay, got a few more, 72. Thinking, so 29%, almost 30% are thinking about it. 34% we want to. Okay, 14 are saying yes, you've made the leap. Okay. Unable to see comments. We will use hub sites as we grow into them. Philip, that's great. So the comments, Tamika, aren't coming in live where everyone can see them. I've just got them as the organizer so I can see those polls as they roll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Tamika, no problem. All right, and okay, close poll. All right. Thank you so much for the participation right off. Usually I don't make you work quite so hard as we go through. So let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about these hub sites. Let me see. I believe you're still seeing my screen. I've got up here the challenge of the flat architecture. So the days of what we used to call having global navigation, or navigation where a site inherited its navigation from a parent site, is gone if we are adopting this modern architecture. So what Microsoft has come forward and said is every site should be its own standalone site, and we should resist the urge to nest subsites underneath. And if you're like me, when you first heard that, you were like, holy moly, that's going to be a lot of sites showing up in the admin portal. That's a lot of sites. But is that really a bad thing? Because if they're all their own standalone sites, that means when I'm in the admin portal, I do get that true picture of what's going on. So it's definitely a different way of thinking about things for sure. And it takes a little minute to kind of wrap our arms around it, because now we have the challenge of saying, okay, a site is a site is a site is a site, AKA a site collection. And I kind of wonder if that phrase site collection will be deprecated, because it's not going to be a collection of sites anymore, right? It's going to be a site, which I think always kind of was confusing for a more end user side of the world anyway. So what do we do? Well, we tend to think about how we used to do it first. So we're used to kind of thinking inside the box. And inside the box, we're limited because we've only got what we used to do for reference. Ashley, as you're out there working with folks that they're trying to wrap their arms around modern SharePoint, where on the list of concerns do you think the whole navigation in every site's its own site falls? Is it like up high? Is it somewhere in the middle? Or do people tend to not care much as you're having those conversations?
So I would say that one of the very first questions people ask is, well, how will people get to the content. What is the
Mm-hmm.
navigation going to
Mm-hmm.
look like? And a lot of times we start the conversations about the architecture of their new SharePoint and what it's going to look like, and they start from the navigation, which it can be valid in a way, but I think when we're talking about SharePoint, we're really talking about what's the content, and then let's look at that afterwards. But people are very, very concerned about what am I going to click? What is it actually going to look like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I am getting a report some folks are hearing beeps. I'm personally am not, but if it keeps up, let us know and we'll try to investigate what's going on. Though someone with a really big cart did just wheel behind me here at the airport, so that was fun. And Lisa's jumping in saying that once hub sites were implemented, that their issues with the flat architecture disappeared. Great to hear that kind of feedback. And that's something we want to definitely address today. That's kind of the whole point of why we're here. So yeah, how do we get to it? Because we're used to having something like this, right? We're used to having that corporate home. So maybe our home page, and of course, all of SharePoint folks know it's not just a page, it's a site, but that home page was maybe the top level site in the site collection. And then we would create subsites for maybe the contract management, for finance and accounting, for HR, for IT, for operations. And then whatever navigation was on that corporate home page would be inherited by those child sites. And in my mind, that's kind of the truest form of what we used to call global navigation. And it worked okay. Any of you all that work on the SharePoint admin side of the world that were neck deep in the I almost lost the phrase in central administration. This presented ourselves with issues when it came to content databases, because one content database could hold one site collection. So if everything was in one site collection, it was all crammed in one content database, and that could be an issue with backups and restores. When we had that kind of architecture, our department sites would then have like their own subsites. So if I'm in IT, I've got application support, exchange, help desk, maybe security. Maybe there was a SharePoint team, if only. I have never worked in a company that was big enough to support its own SharePoint team, right? We always joke about being the redheaded stepchild because SharePoint just happened and somebody's got to figure it out. Here, you take it. So when we implemented that, then we got this kind of nested thing, and everybody had their branches off the trees. And this starts to remind me of the folder structure issues that we can run in document libraries. Ashley, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate folder usage, with 10 being awesome and 1 being kill me now?
Can I do a -1? Oh, folders, yes. The thing everybody wants and everybody uses, but they should not.
But yeah, because it's one of those just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I will say, they're not removing the ability to create subsites. It's just like we would have never stood up and said, you should never use a folder ever. And I'm looking at you now, Teams, because every time I create a channel, I go a folder. That's okay. But it doesn't mean we have to nest. We have to go down these deep structures. And in our old intranet architecture, right, we had top level site, subsite, 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 and then sub, 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 sub. And if you've ever lived through having to untangle knots of broken permissions in those deep subsite structures, or maybe can even relate to the deep folder structure sometimes when permissions are broken here and there, it's a headache and it's really hard. And our business users don't always have the kind of one-on-one support and advice and mentoring they need from the SharePoint team or the IT folks. And it's just hard. So if we remove that nesting from it, stuff gets a little easier. Who doesn't like easy? I'm just saying. But there were pros and cons, right? The pro was you got your global navigation. Woohoo! That's all I got for the pros list. We got inherited navigation. But then we had everything in one content database. We had a ton of broken permissions. You're in central admin, you don't know what you're working with. You don't know what people have done. You can't see it. And let's be real, you still had to go up to that top link bar, the global navigation bar, and edit it somehow, some way for somebody. Reorgs, ugh. Ashley, you came to Pay Group from kind of a larger organization. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, I did some time in industry, as we call it, actually working
Okay.
for a large public company where I was the SharePoint person.
The
And
SharePoint queen.
as you say, the redheaded stepchild of the IT group. Um, and I have to say, we dealt with all of this all the time. And I'm thinking of, when you have to call me to write a script to clean up all of the permissions, you have a problem. Like that is a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
unwieldy thing to deal with.
it is. And did you ever have to suffer through the pain of a reorg when sites needed to be moved around?
Yes, that's right. And typically I would just create a different site, which
Yes.
would be because nobody had the time to do a
Mhm.
true, migration or reorg. And we just need it now. We just need it now. Okay,
Just
now
needed
we've
it
got
now.
orphaned sites.
Yep, you had orphan sites, or you had to invest in a migration tool and learn how to use the migration tool, or when then you had to work with people to find out what needs to go and what needs to stay. Of course, it all has to stay. You can't get rid of anything. So it was a process. We'll call it that, a process. So maybe we didn't do it with one huge site collection. Maybe we had the corporate home and then we created other site collections. So contract management was its own site collection, and finance and accounting was its own, and IT was its own, and then they had their own subsites. So that was a little bit better because now the contract management content site collection could be separated out into a separate content database. So if we had a lot of data and really big, like finance and accounting, which has a lot of data, they could be in their own content database. So that made things a little bit better. We could then see each of these site collections in the admin portal, and we knew exactly who ran what, who owned what, and have our site collection admins. It was better for sure, but we still had broken permissions. There was no global navigation because each site collection was its own security boundary, right? Broken permissions, no true view because subsites still hidden, right? And I know this is feeling like a slow buildup. We're just trying to walk from in the beginning to where we are today. So this is how we've been used to doing it and how we're used to working with it. But modern SharePoint is going to call for modern architecture, and it's time to unnest our sites. Now, I will tell you this from experience here in the last year. Doing a migration where we're taking subsites and sub-subsites and elevating them up into their own site collections, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. So if you are preparing for that, if that's something you're thinking about, um, start documenting those subsites that are going to be elevated up. Document the permissions because migration tools won't presume who should own it. So those subsite owners groups don't necessarily come over and provide that security. There are just some things to think about as you're preparing. That's the free portion of the free webinar today. So now to the bubbles, right? Because now if we're not nesting things in site collections and they're just their own standalone sites, are they just floating around out there unattached to anything? That's how it feels. Anybody out there feel like if you're not gathering things into bundles of site collections, then how do we wrap our arms around all of it? That just seems to be the feel I have when I talk to folks. Ashley, what's your experience typically been when you tell someone, okay, everything gets broken out into its own top level site?
Yeah, so there's an initial shocked reaction, right? Because we
Okay.
think of, everybody's used to nesting. Everybody likes to put things into collections, into groups. It makes sense to us. But after they get used to that, I've also seen it go the other way, where we, a site for everything, and I'm very encouraging of that. But sometimes we have to rein it in. But yeah, this is what people like to do. They like to make sure that things have logical relationships with each other. So it's uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. I kind of blame the file share, and it's not the file share's fault because for most of our technological life, that's all we've had. So, okay, you're in IT, you get a folder on the file share. Do with it what you want. Okay, well, in IT, we have these different departments or groups or divisions or business units. Okay, so each one gets a folder. That's the organization. That's what we're used to. So if we've become used to SharePoint, Oh, we get a site. Okay, so I've got one big site, which used to be one big folder, and now I'm going to break it up. So we're kind of following that same methodology. Let me see, Nick, what you say? Linking to more restricted site collections is the biggest problem with no security trimming. Agreed. There can definitely be some issues because the security trimming is a little bit different right now. There's some ways that can be a little bit better, a little bit better. We'll see if we have some time at the end to kind of talk about that. So the good news is though, and I tend to lean on the URL a lot when I'm doing stuff in SharePoint, that even though we're breaking out those nested structures, everything is still contained within the confines of our tenant, or the way I think about it, the confines of the URL. So I know I can go to my joyofsharepoint.sharepoint.com/site/HR team, and there's my HR team demo site. Or if I'm at Pate Group, I go to /site/training, and there's the training site. So naming conventions help. Being consistent with how we name things helps. We wouldn't want to do a /site/business development if we have 3 or 4 business development teams. Now we're fighting over the naming structure. But there are ways to make this better, and there are ways to make sure that works for us, not against us, because these really aren't bubbles that are just kind of floating around out there untethered. They're actually Legos. They're building blocks, which is pretty fantastic because that means it's modular and I can move them around however I need to. And like the organization I was with when I first started in SharePoint, we reorged every 6 months, whether it felt like we needed to or not. Hey, let's do something. Let's reorg. No big deal. Okay, you want IT to report to operations now instead of finance? Okay, I'll just go, right? Business continues. It's not a problem. Oh, this is a big one, Darlene. The one issue is not being able to use inherited site columns. Yes, you are correct. The term store can still help you with that. So if you have like a lot of big choice columns, for now you could build those up in the term store as managed metadata so everybody could use that. But I have heard rumblings that there is going to be an enhancement to, even though you don't hear it called content types very much, but maybe a content type hub. So there are still some ways you can create content types and use those consistently across sites. But I'm a fan of the term store, honestly. All right, so you might be thinking, Joy, that's all well and good, but I still want my global navigation back. But I want to be real with you. Ashley and I talked about this just yesterday. True global navigation, set it in one place and forget about it, has always been kind of a myth. I'll go so far to say it was a lie. Because even when I was doing consulting and training and working neck deep in classic on-prem SharePoint day in and day out, I still heard people say all the time, you mean I've got to manually change my navigation? Agree or disagree, Ashley?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that it's always been kind of a myth. If you had somebody who was dedicated to making those changes, that it was something that was on their radar all the time, maybe other folks could forget about that work, but it was always something that had to be managed.
And people complained about it a lot because it's one more thing, right? It's one more thing I have to do. And I totally get that because a lot of us, when we're working on the business side of the world, SharePoint is just, it becomes one of those other duties as assigned. You didn't really necessarily go in to become an HR rep or to do finance and accounting or to work in operations and have to learn SharePoint. So that's a valid thing for sure. But the truth is, even though we called it global, most of the time it really wasn't. You still had to go edit this or add that. And here come the hub sites. So the hub sites are what let us take our modern architecture and our stuff, that's the technical word of the day, that was spread out in these various sites for multiple reasons. Maybe just because the audience is different, so we don't need server support in IT going to the networking site to filter through all that stuff. You could do pages to keep that clean, or you could do another site, right? Maybe it's a permissions issue. Permissions always have been, in my mind, the #1 reason for growing architecture. You have a different audience with a different set of permissions. They need their own place to go. So we can have our groups. See, I think Microsoft needs a thesaurus for Christmas this year. I don't want to say groups. We have our business units inside of our departments, and they've got stuff they work on. So those sites spread wide, even though it falls under the umbrella of one department. And we've got management that needs to be able to jump into several of them. But I might be in network, so I don't need to go to server support. I'm not on the SharePoint team, so I don't go to their site. I just need one central place where I can see news and roll-ups, consistent navigation in one spot, and then everybody else just works in their own place. And that's the role that hub sites bring to modern SharePoint and modern architecture. But I find folks get a little bit confused because they talk about creating hub sites. Do I need a communication site or a hub site? A team site or a hub site? And I just want to make sure that we start out understanding that hub site is not a type of site. It's not a third player that's come into the SharePoint game. It's just a feature back, this is back speaking to my old days, it's a feature we activate on either a communication site or a team site. I got a comment, couldn't agree more about the thesaurus for Microsoft. I know they reuse some words so many times. So when we're coming in and we're looking at our architecture, you could create a communication site, which tends to be my go-to, make that the hub because it creates clean. When I create a communication site, there's no Office 365 group because all my teams already have their groups. So I don't need that. And it's one place that they can come. See all of this information that's a roll-up that has to do with them, and then go on to wherever they need to go to work. Now, on the other hand, if we want a hub site and we want a team, too far, I clicked. We can absolutely, I did it again, take a team site and turn that into a hub site. So that way everyone that's part of that hub could go have chat inside of Teams, because that does create with an Office 365 group. And there can be planner, there can be joint inbox, there can be a shared calendar, all those goodies that Office 365 groups give us could be what we want for that hub. That's one of those consultant answers. It depends. It depends on what those people need and what assets they have or want to exploit inside of the business. So we still just have two types of sites inside of modern SharePoint. Either one can be registered as a hub site. So what do we get when we register a site as a hub site? Well, we get consistent navigation. I'm not going to call it global, at least not on purpose. Sometimes I slip. But any sites that I come in, and we'll play with this in a minute, and I join to a hub site, will pick up that navigation from that registered hub. So we get some navigation consistency is what I tend to call it. But guess what? Sneak peek, it's still customizable. So if there's stuff in there you want that's not officially part of the hub, you can still have it. It's still SharePoint, and you can still link to it if it's browsable. Consistent branding. So if I have a theme or a site design, once I join a site to a hub, that theme and that branding flows to that joined site. Focus search results. So if I'm searching inside of my hub, by default, my results are going to stay scoped to the hub. But of course, I can always click and go out and get a broader set of search results. And then we have content roll-ups. And I don't know about you all, but used to, one of the pains of classic SharePoint was not being able to easily roll up content. You had to go into Designer and maybe create some kind of a custom list view web part, or you went and got a third-party web part where you could point at lists and separate site collections and roll up values from that. You had some options, but they weren't always easy. Ashley, back in your industry, classic SharePoint days. Did you ever have the fun of having to work out on getting cross-site content aggregation?
Oh yeah, and often what would happen is you just end up with a search center, right? You spin up your enterprise search center just to find things that are within the subsites in various places, and then you've got tons of scopes to manage and tons of refiners to manage and many pages of search. So it's definitely a lot easier now to get a real laser focus on the content that's grouped together with a hub site.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I just read a comment that we've got some folks that are going to be migrating, quote, too many 2013 site collections to SharePoint. More than 3,000 different site collections. Large
Oh man.
company, so a lot of data is justified. I've come up with a new question that I ask folks. So if part of your responsibility in preparing for this move is to encourage, um, maybe beg and plead for people to sort through their content before the migration, and that's hard. I totally understand how hard that can be. But ask the question, once we get in the new environment, when you search, do you expect this older content to be in your search results? Or maybe another way to ask, if they're talking about, well, it's this old stuff, but I still need it. Okay, but are you going to get frustrated if that comes up in your search results every day? If you don't want to see it in search, don't bring it over into SharePoint. I have found that has started to click with people better than, oh, do you use it or is it reference only? You know, because I'm like, oh, well, isn't it the same? But I found the search question starts to get people going, oh, because the number one thing that people complain about with search is, well, I search, but I don't find what I want. I get all this other stuff that I don't care about. Huh, should it be there? Put it back on them. All right, back to the topic at hand, hub sites. I just wanted to add that little nugget. So content aggregation, roll-ups, oh, they're so easy. And I'll tell you, you can even cheat. Maybe you're not ready for hub sites yet. You can now roll up content from different sites on any of these web parts that are listed here on the slide. So even if you're not on a hub site, you can go to your news web part and say, well, I want to see news from wellness, HR, and finance. And you can roll that up. No hub required, which I think is awesome, beyond awesome. This was a dream 5 years ago, right? All right, somewhere in here's my arrow. There it is. What we don't get with hub sites, and I can flip a coin whether we like this or not, everyone has a different opinion. We don't get inherited permissions. Usually the first concern is, well, if I join something to a hub, then people are going to get into this stuff they don't need to see. Nope, because you still have that security boundary that is present anytime you see /sites /site name. That is a hard and fast security boundary to SharePoint. Nothing flows from that /site to a different /sites. That's the good news. That's the border. So even though I'm joining a hub, my URL is not changing. It is still, well, it's like the US. It is still a state, even though it's part of the United States. I like that. That's going to be part of my new training. So I found when we start thinking about going to modern architecture that the knee jerk then is to go, okay, so I'm going to have a communication site for my company, public information for HR, and then a team site just for HR people. So I need a hub site to join them together. Do you? Because that will start to look like a lot of hubs. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying, does everyone in HR need to go to that communication site frequently? Or is that just where we push stuff for everyone else to get to? If that's not something that they need to go to frequently and get roll-ups from, because the team's pushing that content out there, right? They don't need a hub. Maybe they just need a link. Maybe on the com site, we put a link for them to their team site. So when they're first getting used to the new architecture, it's really easy to get to it. Or we use web browsers, right? That's how we get to SharePoint. So I could have a favorite. I could have a bookmark in the browser that I use, probably Chrome or Firefox. I'm waiting for the new redone Edge to drop. I've heard really good things about that. Then maybe I'll start encouraging people to use the Microsoft browser again. But we don't need to have the knee-jerk reaction go every time I have two similar sites, they need to have a hub. Because it's not necessarily the case. Ashley, what is your preferred way to help people start thinking about the difference between that company public site and the team site, and how to move between the sites that a department may own?
Yeah, so what I like to do is really have people think about logical groupings of sites around a function or a process as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
around a department. Because I think when we have the department in the forefront of our minds, that's how we still sort of get stuck on the old way of doing things, the old architecture, which means that I absolutely have to have a navigation link to my, IT team site as well as the communication site and all that good stuff. So I think when we talk about grouping things with process or grouping things by topic, then we get a much more natural relationship between all the sites that could be in a hub, and it's the way people work as opposed to putting these arbitrary labels based on what department you report to.
Absolutely agree. Sorry, I was trying to mute to cut out this announcement that's going on. Did have a question, but what about if you made that communication site the hub site? And you could do that. There's no rule that says you couldn't. And if that makes sense for a particular department, I say absolutely go do it. But I would ask the question, does all of HR, or does a significant portion of, I'm picking on HR totally, of that department need to go to that communication site for their job? Or is it just maybe the select few that manage that communication site? Because typically we take our content from our team site and maybe use that move to function in a list or library and move it to that communication site so other people can get to it. Typically, there's an exception to every rule. That's why occasionally I still will tell people, yeah, you just need to put a folder in that library. Maybe you need to register that communication site as a hub site. But if that team doesn't need to go to it day in and day out, they're not going there to look for roll-ups of information, then I say it may not be necessary. And I hope that helps. Lisa's saying she looks at it as a jumping off place for users, and it absolutely can be. But again, our internal team, I'm going to use HR for the example, my team curates that data and then pushes it out for other people. So typically the team itself doesn't have much need to hop over to that communication site. In fact, let's be real, how many times do we spend a lot of significant time on our corporate homepage? We just go to the department where we work or the library where we work. We might go to the homepage, see if the new wellness Fitbit challenge is up and see how much we can win if we get the most steps in a given 6-month period. And then we go do our work. Communication sites are kind of a less significant portion of that if it's our internal department. But again, there's a lot of times where that may not be accurate. You may want to do that. And that's the good news. You can make it what you need it to be. So if I need it to be a jumping off place inside of a department, like Ashley says, that has a wide scope in their processes, then absolutely do it. Go for it. See, I'm going to kind of read through comments. See what we got here. Yes, I like that. The point of view of the user for them to get to the other sites to see if it needs to be connected to the hub. Do you need that jumping off place? Do you need that landing page? That's a good way to look at it. So I would recommend resisting the urge to hubify everything because everything may not need to be hubified. Oh, I have a question from Philip. Would you associate an HR team created in Teams? Yes. Uppercase T and lowercase t, I'm totally tracking, to the HR hub? I would say no and teach HR to access their Teams team via Teams. And I love how much we get to use Teams these days. And subsequently access SharePoint for said team as needed, but do so via Teams, open in SharePoint. Rock on, Philip. Yep. So, okay, HR team, here are your channels. This is where some of your documents are. I've got a webinar in the making, I think, of the benefits of tabbing out our Teams environments. If you think that'd be cool, let me know at the end of this webinar. But yeah, you can put tabs to everything you need. This becomes your digital hub. And if you need to get into SharePoint, boom, click the button and it goes to your team site. Absolutely. I think that's a great way of looking at it. Teams is more and more coming to the forefront as the front end for SharePoint. Sometimes I feel a little sad about that, but I've only seen positive things come out of it, as long as we remember SharePoint is still our document management tool. Teams is just that easy access to it. All right, so this is kind of how I start to think about hubs, right? I'm going to pick on projects now. So I'm going to leave HR alone for a minute. They're tired. Then we'll let HR rest. So in my ideal world, you have something like projects or maybe manufacturing plants or, oh, HR is coming back in again. I worked with a client recently. They have an HR department in 5 or 6 different states where they have businesses. This was a manufacturing facility. So each one of their HR teams gets their own site because there are different permissions there, right? Michigan doesn't need to see what Kentucky is doing in their HR sites, but we're going to create a hub so that HR management that does need to get to all those various sites has that single point of access, that jumping off spot. Projects is another great one. We've got some folks that I'm going to go see in a couple of weeks in New York. They have a lot of projects, very different audiences. Project Hub. If you don't have access to those other project sites, right, you access denied, or you don't see the link. It depends on if you do quick launch or the navigation. But it gives people that manage all of those projects for their organization access to anything they need to get to, a roll-up of news articles. Roll-ups are security trimmed. If there is a document and highlighted activity that I don't have access to see, but highlighted activity is rolling it up, I won't see it because I don't have permission. So there's still security there. So we have a wide topic, a wide purpose, designated audiences, and a single landing page. Projects is probably the easiest example. And I know we don't all work in project-based companies or environments, so it's not always the most relevant example. But if you have different sites for certain locations, maybe plant locations, you can have that plant hub for your overarching management. Let me see, make sure I was kind of looking around as I was talking. Okay, I haven't missed any questions. One more way to think about it is maybe a shared services hub. So if you have something considered shared services or core services in your organization, you could create a hub for that. So your folks that need help, they need to know who to talk to. There's one hub site, they can see roll-ups and information from all those core services without maybe the overhead of other departments that aren't considered shared services. It's like a secondary homepage. That's another way that could come into play. Ashley, am I missing something obvious, or do you have any good examples that you like to use when you're talking with folks about it?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered everything here, and I think what I love most is really coming back to that whole search experience where everything is focused in and security trimmed. So when you have like a shared services or a projects type of hub, and that's your setup, what I really love is being able to point somebody to search and say, if you search across that hub and you're looking for a particular project, you're only going to see the projects that you have access to, which doesn't just, give us a good security setting, because of course that's great to be secure, but it also means that what you see is relevant to you. So it means, more efficient process. It means people getting things done faster. It's definitely something that I like to point people towards when they're looking around.
Right, right. Got a question from Lisa. If it's not part of the hub, then the trim search isn't going to apply. If you're searching from somewhere that's not part of a hub, you'll still get results from hub sites and join sites. You're just getting a larger what's the word I'm looking for?
A larger pool, right?
Pool. Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go.
But
There
I
you
would
go.
say that security trimming still does apply. I'm not sure that this was what was meant by the question, but the trimmed results do still apply. You only get back what you have access to.
Yes, yeah, but it is good. So, like in a situation where you've got folks that only need to see results that relate to them, maybe you do have a thing where you've got all these plants or all these departments or all these subsidiaries, and you only want your people to see certain things that they need, then yes, hubifying would definitely help scale down their search results. So I know if I'm searching from inside my hub, I'm only getting the results of those joined sites. And if I need a larger result, I could back out and go do that, or I could search from like a corporate homepage. Question here, are you saying that the SharePoint site provisioned by Teams can be linked to a hub site? Absolutely. It can join a hub site, or it itself could be hubified. So you've got two options there. Because that site that's created with Teams is a 100% fully functional SharePoint team or SharePoint site and should be used as such. That should become your, here it is, Teams collaboration space that for their document management that should be happening in that site that's associated to the team, the uppercase T team. It's so hard. Too many teams. All right, so this may be a little difficult to see. Maybe if you have a big monitor, it'll be better for you. So this is just a snippet of suggested architecture diagram I sent to one of our clients. So you can see human resources. They're going to have a communication site, and that is where the information that everyone in the organization may need to access. It's like open enrollment, right? That's where the forms are going to be. That's where you go to submit your filled out forms. Wellness events, right? Big events for HR, all that information goes there. But then they've got a HR team site that's going to be hubified because they're going to have a site per HR location, state. And all those state sites are going to join to that team site. Since it's a team site that's being hubified, they get teams. And I actually call out now in my architecture that Teams is going to be represented and created. In fact, that HR team site will be created from Teams because it's just easier. You get everything you need. It's one-stop shopping. Joel Olson did a really good presentation in Kansas City a few weeks back, and he kind of showed the slide with like, if you create an Office 365 group from Outlook, this is what you get. Or if you create it from OneDrive, this is what you get. If you create it from SharePoint, this. He's like, we're starting to tell people, just create it from Teams. If you don't want the inbox, don't use it. But at least it's there if you ever need it. It does simplify life a little bit. So here we've got company public on communication, the hub site for HR management to be able to jump off to any team location site that they need. Teams going on in the background for instant communication, right? Chat, they can do their meetings from there, easy file sharing, tabs to any resources that live in SharePoint or other places as needed. On the far right-hand side of the slide, we've got engineering. They're going to have a hub site. They want a team site because they want all of engineering to have one big chat area. And then they're going to get a site per, they call it APQP. I could not tell you now what that stands for. It's been a minute. Something to do with quality, I think. And then, of course, teams. So that's how it's starting to shake out in the architecture. We like to call out when a hub site's going to be represented, where Teams is coming into play. So say a shared calendar would be nice to default to yes with Teams, and it does. So yes. So when you create your group from Teams, you get your team, you get your SharePoint site, you get a joint or shared calendar and a joint inbox, as well as Planner, OneNote. Ashley, what am I forgetting? Is that everything?
Sounds about right.
Okay, I'm
Calendar,
probably
yep.
forgetting. I think that's it.
There's
Okay,
so many things, which is
I know.
fantastic. There's a lot
It's
there.
Christmas. Yes, you can see the calendar in Outlook. You just go to the group section, click on it, and you'll have that group calendar there. Thought it had to be an Outlook group. Nope. No, it's an Office 365 group. It'll be there, I promise, because I've got like 40 of them in my Outlook. It's overload. Does it sound wrong to associate your private team to a hub site where your hub site is part of your intranet? No, not at all. I would say that's not wrong because that private is, can people, if people search for it, will they find it? If it's private, no, they can't volunteer to join. So basically you're talking about security. It's a secured site. So no, you could still join that to a hub site because you may have people that are part of that security for that site and a lot of others that they need to get to. And this could make it easier for them. Your permissions will still be respected regardless of, I'm going to say it, the state of hubification. That's my new SharePoint word, and I'm stuck on it. Gala suppressed with Teams. Yes, if you create it as a private group, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, it will not show up in the global address list, right?
Yeah, that's right. If it's private, you're not going to be able to get at it if you don't have access already. And somebody who's in it is going to have to give you access, an owner.
Right, right. So another question. In your example, is human resources a hub site as well as the corporate HR team site? In my example that's on this screen, the only hub site is the corporate HR team site. That is a hub. And then each team site per location will be joined to that hub. The communication site will not, because that's where the company public information goes. At some point, Teams groups stopped being listed in Outlook private. Yes, because people freaked out when a team would get created and that group would show up in the gal. People freaked out. So Microsoft pretty quick went and flipped it so it wouldn't. Yeah, there was quite a lot of alarm surrounding that. All right, let me find my arrow here. Okay, so keep in mind, as we're talking about how hub sites can come in and can join a wide number of sites with a common purpose to a single landing page, one thing you cannot do is take a hub site and join it to another hub site. For example, perhaps, and a lot of people do this, I think it's pretty groovy, we take our corporate homepage, which we know is a site, and we hubify it. And all of the communication sites that people want to go to get that company public information, like events and news from HR and operations and finance and IT, right? We get that consistent navigation. All those company public communication sites get joined to the corporate homepage hub. So no matter which one of those you go to, you've got the consistent navigation. I love it. It's fantastic. But if I'm doing that and one of those sites needs to be a hub site, I can't join it. But if you're looking at the bottom of the screen, you can fake it. You know, they say fake it till you make it, right? So what you do, we're going to actually jump away from slides. And those of you that know me know I don't usually stay in slides like this a lot. So it feels kind of awkward for me. But we're going to actually jump into real SharePoint in just a minute because I have a demo. So this is a demo from my Joy of SharePoint demo hub. Joy of SharePoint is a hub site. And on my hub site navigation, right, I've got my shared services drop down where people can go to HR and accounting and all that fun stuff. I've got a link to manufacturing. Projects. Projects is also a hub site. I didn't join it to Joy of SharePoint because that didn't make sense and is not possible. But I won't want folks as they're moving around the intranet and all these joined hub sites to be able to get to projects too. I want it to be consistent. So I just added the link because it's still our navigation that we can customize. So although projects is not joined to Joy of SharePoint, it's still linked. There's no branding that's going to get pushed down to it. There's no, like, it's not going to have manufacturing and shared services. And we'll look at that here. Un momento. Let's see. So in projects, we're gonna go look at this. It's just too much slides. We see that in projects, right, the theme is different. It's red. I see my projects home link. I created a manual link, yes, manual link back to the intranet home. And now I've got my WIC project and my Pate Group demo link. So there again, I kind of create what I need. Let's see. Probably going to have to share a different screen. So let me do that. It doesn't want me to do that. All right, bear with me. An unexpected error has occurred. Ashley, what screen are you seeing? Is it still slides?
Yeah, it still says demo. Yeah.
Okay. The sharing drop down is not allowing me to pick. Let's do a good old-fashioned Alt-Tab again. Just try this again. I love PowerPoint. Maybe if I just go back to what it knows and try it again. Are you seeing Joy of SharePoint now?
I do see it. Yep.
That makes me happy. Okay, so here's my site, right? Here is my hub navigation. I see share services. This is the cascading navigation. I did have it mega menu, but I didn't have a lot of links here, as you can see, so it was depressingly empty. There's my manufacturing link. And here's projects. So if I click on projects, it's going to think about it for a minute because airport Wi-Fi. So here we go, right? I'm on my project site. I've got the navigation that project people need, but I don't want to leave them abandoned, right? I don't want to just take them away from the homepage and them have no way to get back. So I just did that good old-fashioned edit that we as site owners and above have. And again, I can link to this any way I need to. And let me get this out of the way. More out of the way. There we go. On my navigation here, there's no good place for the toolbar. I can see my hub site settings right from here. If I don't want to show the actual hub site in the navigation, I can choose to remove that. That's a pretty new feature. I can have my own separate icon. I can change the look. And if I set a custom theme here, then it's going to flow down to any of the sites like Wick that are joined to this hub. And what's great, so who here remembers the olden days of hubs? Can you believe there already have been olden days of hubs? And Donna, I do see you, and yes, I will absolutely jump back and we'll talk about inheriting site columns. Don't want you to think you're being forgotten. In the olden days, when they first released hub sites, I could only do them by PowerShell. I'm not a big fan of PowerShell. Ashley, what's your opinion of PowerShell?
Well, I love it.
Of course you
but,
do. You're
but I'm a that's kind of in my space. But yeah, I remember this. It's funny you were saying the olden days of hub sites, and I'm thinking, what's changed? What's changed? Oh yes, I
There's an
remember.
interface.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I mean, putting the control, even for somebody who does know how to do it in PowerShell, I mean, it is so much faster just to do it here in the admin center.
Oh, absolutely. So I can come here. Let me see. Let me move. I got my comments up here. I'm just kind of getting out of the way. So the new admin portal, if you've not been in there recently, oh my goodness, it's just the best. So I have a column here that shows me all my hub sites. And these kind of move around quite a bit. I can see that my group test is not a hub site. HR team is not a hub site. HR hub, guess what? That's a hub site. I named it that. So when I look at it, I know for a fact it's a hub. So I could come in here to HR team. We'll pick on that. Come up here to the menu, and now I've got the ability right here to register as a hub site or associate it with a hub. Now, if I register this as a hub site, I can change the name here. I don't need to do that, but I could if I wanted to. And I could say that Bob's going to be the hub manager. He can join other sites to this hub site, which is good. Otherwise, they're putting in tickets or they're having to get in touch with, IT to do this. And that's not really something we need to have. He can't manage the permissions of the sites that are joined. So we want to keep that in mind. He needs to have access to them. So I can do that. I've got some management capabilities here. I would say that this interface came into the admin portal. It feels like more than 6 months ago, but I don't know, maybe nine
I
months
don't,
ago?
yeah, I was gonna say it's probably between 6. I don't know that it's that late, 9 months, but certainly within the last half year.
Yeah, it's pretty shiny and new. So now let me go. Are you going to let me use my back button? Yay. So maybe this Wix site, for some unknown reason, we've decided needs to be joined to that HR site. So as soon as I get my site actions gear here, I can come up, go to my site information, hub site association, because there's been a reorg and the HR is taking over the Wix project. It's just as easy as that. Reorgs just got infinitely easier. So I'm going to jump back to the admin center again. So maybe we decided to try out hub sites. We wanted to see how it worked. And maybe for one particular situation, it was just something we didn't need. Maybe management realized that roll-ups were happening and they kind of panicked. So I'm going to pick on this, the Joy SharePoint group. The hub site's not working out. We don't like it. I can unregister this as a hub site. If any sites are associated with this hub, they will be disassociated. They're not being deleted. Links are not changing. And that's one of the awesome things about hub sites. I join it, nobody's favorites break. Bookmarks don't have to be changed, right? Everything stays the same. If I unjoin, bookmarks don't break, favorites don't break. It's fantastic. All right, guess what? That is no longer a hub. So it's no longer getting roll-ups from other sites. Those other sites now just have their own top link bar. They're not getting that hub navigation. It's just that easy. Working with some folks recently, and one of my colleagues, Stephen, some of you may have been on some webinars when Stephen was around, was telling them, don't stress about your navigation, don't stress about the hubs. Those are some of the easiest things to manage now. Once we get content where it needs to be, then we start asking how do we need to get to it? And our hub sites are what are going to make that possible. So it looks like we are bumping up on the hour. I am going to fight with GoToWebinar one more minute. I'm going to jump back to slides. If you all do want these slides made available, we can do that. Should be seeing slides again. I'm going to fast forward through my demo slides and close with this reminder. I think you're seeing my Lego screen now.
Yes, we are.
Awesome. We're playing with Legos now, guys. And who doesn't like playing with Legos? It's modular. If you need a hub, you can make it. If you decide you don't like it, you can unregister it. Reorgs are now easy. Everything just got a whole lot easier with our navigation and being able to create these little mini landing pages for our groups to get to. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the contact information up on the slide because I know some of you probably need to actually go on and do real work, even though it's a Friday. That's so silly. And now I'm going to go back to questions and see what I've missed or what I need to answer. Okay. I really appreciate you all being here for another Joy of SharePoint webinar. Our next one coming up, we're going to have the esteemed Mr. Rackley on, kind of get his take from everything that's going to be happening this week for Ignite and how he thinks that's going to affect our lives over the next year. So that'll be a lot of fun. Encourage you guys to come. We'll get some more information out about that. Now I'm going to see. So Donna, I know you have a question. Not being able to inherit site columns, does this mean we can no longer create lookup lists, such as the content type, and share that across sites that are associated to the hub? So let me ponder that. Ashley, you've probably done more work with content types recently than I have.
Yeah, so the thing is, it's not an easy answer, unfortunately. So the way that I approach that is really more from a development perspective. So what you want to do is get somebody involved who does know PowerShell. And it takes a little bit of work to set it up, but what you want to do is create all the site content types, all of the site columns that you're going to need, anything you want to reuse across. And then what you do is you go ahead and create that again in PowerShell. So you have somebody script that up, from what you've
Hmm.
created, and then you script it up and run it against every other site that you want to make changes on. I actually have a client right now where we're doing exactly that. And even though we've got to get IT involved, even though it seems like it could be painful because you can't inherit changes right now across the sites, there is still, as I said, kind of an automated way. It's easier to run a pre-built PowerShell script that you're tweaking here and there than it is to hand create everything. So, that's where someone like me would come in and help you do that. Shameless
Having an
plug.
Ashley on your team is amazing. I just have
Oh,
to
thank you.
say, absolutely amazing. Let me
I
see.
appreciate it.
Where will the slides be available for download? So I will hand these off to Stacy, who's in charge of our marketing. And typically she does a follow-up email and we'll have the link available in that. So you just keep an eye out for the, I won't call it spam, but it's kind of spam, the marketing emails, right? Um, Darlene, you're going to be at the North American Collab Summit. I'm hoping to be there as well. That will be awesome. All right, what else we got in here? Ashley, are you going to the Collab
I
Summit?
was just going to say, I will be speaking there. Yep. So I will see you guys there.
Awesome. Oh, Nick created a shared services hub as we were going through it. Awesome, Nick. That's exciting. When I train and I watch people actually do stuff while I'm training, that's always a lot of fun to see. And those scary back in the on-prem days because things were a lot less undoable. Is there still a visitor's permission level where people in the org who aren't part of the group can have read-only access? Joel, yes, absolutely. So even though there is that Office 365 group that exists on our team sites when they're connected to Teams, blah, 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 right? You still have your SharePoint permission groups. So as long as you're not putting anyone in that Office 365 group, you can restrict them by putting them just in that SharePoint sites visitor group. But again, that's a SharePoint thing. You cannot give someone in an Office 365 group lower than member because especially if you think about it in terms of Teams, right? If someone has read only in Teams, that means they are a lurker. They're not chatting, they're just watching people chat. And that's creepy, right? So it kind of doesn't do any good to have the read only from the group perspective, but you can absolutely have it from the SharePoint permissions perspective. And that way, they can have access to all of the documents and the data in SharePoint, but not be butting in on what's happening in Teams because you might be talking about them, right? They don't need to know. So, best of both worlds. That could be a reason we would want to hubify Teams and such so that the search extends to it. Okay, okay. I don't think I understand that question. I'm going to touch base with Lisa about that later. All right, still going through. Where would you put something like a knowledge database library that multiple groups and teams or the whole organization need to access? Corporate homepage. What do you think about, Ashley? Would you say
Yeah,
corporate homepage if it's
I
something
would say so.
everyone?
Yeah,
Yep,
if
yep,
everybody's got to have access, then it's got to be a place that you're not restricting access from anybody.
yep. And hopefully they are read-only there.
Yes, right. Don't let everybody change the knowledge database.
It's like Wikipedia. You know the answer's right because anyone can edit it at any time. All right, scrolling back through answers. You guys are awesome. You're still hanging in here with us. Let's see. Okay, I think we've got these. Got these. Yeah, Darlene's talking about without a global navigation, I spend a ton of time handling support tickets. Yeah, so you can still take that hub navigation, right, and build it out for how it needs to be. And the good news is with the hub, right, once the sites join to it, they pick it up. So it becomes that not truly global, but everything associated with the hub gets that link, and it can be tailored to what the users there need. So it can really go a long way. It's basically global navigation 2.0. So John asked, I think you've answered, but what is your recommendation when people need to get to those other sites? Site contents or add a link just to the body of the page? So if they're not sites where it makes sense to have a hub, so like different purposes, different audiences, different scopes, but they still may need to get to them here and there. Yeah, quick links. I love quick links. It's very manual, but I can put an icon in it and make it a color. I enjoy that. You could still use the site navigation itself. If it's a team site, you know, you've got your left nav. If it's a communication site, that left nav pivots to the top of the page. So it's still site specific navigation, but it's 100% editable. You can put a link in that to anywhere on the World Wide Web you need to get to, internal or external. So yeah, you can build out that navigation whether it's hubified or not. Okay. Christy brought up a good point from earlier about people searching. Sometimes people don't know how to search well. You are absolutely correct. We should do a modern SharePoint tips and tricks webinar, Ashley, and it just be helpful hints.
That sounds fun.
Be
I
fun.
would love to do that.
We'll crowdsource it. What's your pain point? We'll see if we have a tip for it.
I'm sure we could, for sure.
That would be fun. To the Twitter. Okay, guys, I think that's it. Is there anybody that I have ignored? It was unintentional. Go ahead and maybe, I hate to ask you, but repeat yourself in the question section. Um, I appreciate you all being here. We always have so much fun. It's silly that I actually, you know, get to do this as part of my job. My company's Pate Group supports the Joy SharePoint very well, and it's a blessing to get to do it. And it's always fun to get to chat with you guys. So please, if you have any other questions or maybe your question got missed, I apologize. I'm happy to answer it now. Otherwise, I'm going to say go enjoy your weekend. Yay, Friday. All right. And of course, as always, the recording of this will be available on YouTube probably in about 48 hours or so. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ashley.